The air inside the arena in Atlanta in 1996 felt heavy enough to crush a chest. Over 30,000 people were screaming, but to 19-year-old Kerri Strug, the stadium was dead silent. She stood at the far end of the runway, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Moments earlier, her first vault had ended in disaster. A loud snap had echoed inside her leg, followed by a burning fire in her ankle that made every breath feel like glass in her lungs. She could barely touch her left foot to the blue carpet. The pain was sharp, deep, and relentless, spreading like poison up her calf. Yet the clock was ticking, and the world was watching. Her brain screamed at her to lie down on the padded floor, but years of rigid training took over her body. She knew she had only seconds to decide whether to walk away or throw her broken body back into the air. For years, her life had been stripped down to a cold routine of endless hardship. Inside a lonely ranch gym, Coach Bella Caroli had carved her into a precision machine. Tears were treated as weakness, and pain was simply something to be ignored. Day after day, she had performed hundreds of routine jumps until her hands bled and her joints throbbed. In that harsh world, a gymnast did not stop for an injury. You worked through the tears, or you were left behind. She had spent her whole career in the shadow of other stars. Being part of the Magnificent Seven meant every girl had to fight for her own space under the bright lights. Kerri was often seen as the quiet worker, the steady presence who never complained. She had spent years watching teammates take the headlines while she stayed in the background, working twice as hard just to prove she belonged on the same floor with the best in the world. Now, the entire weight of the team rested on her shoulders. The scoreboard glowed under the hot lights, flashing numbers that meant victory or heartbreak for her country. The vault runway looked longer than it ever had before. Every step forward was a choice to enter a dark place where only pure duty remained. There was no time to think about tomorrow, no time to worry about what her body would feel like when the sun came up. From the edge of the mat, Bella Caroli leaned over the barrier, his voice cutting through the wild roar of the crowd. He kept shouting that she could do it, telling her that she had to run one more time for the team. That command had the force of absolute authority. For years, his voice had guided her every movement, shaping her choices and defining her limits. To disobey now was impossible. Inside her head, a quiet fight was raging. Her left foot was already swelling inside her tight white shoe, and every twitch of her muscle sent shock waves of agony to her brain. She believed that if she did not vault again, the dream of Team Gold would vanish into thin air. She did not know that the scores had already secured the prize. In her mind, failure was the only thing that would happen if she stayed on the mat. She wiped her chalked hands on her hips, took a deep breath, and sprinted down the track. Each hit of her left foot against the wooden floor felt like a hammer striking an open wound. She hit the springboard with everything she had left, launching her small frame high into the warm air. She flipped and twisted above the crowd, suspended in time, suspended between glory and destruction, before slamming down onto the hard blue landing pad. The moment her feet hit the ground, her left leg collapsed under her weight. She instantly hopped backward onto her good right foot, saluting the judges with a painful smile before falling to her knees. The crowd exploded into wild cheers, but Kerri was gasping for air on the floor, holding her ruined leg. The thrill of landing was instantly swallowed by a wave of cold, sharp agony that swept through her entire body. Behind the scenes, far from the flashing cameras, the truth was far less heroic. Doctors rushed to cut her shoe off, revealing an ankle that was rapidly turning dark purple and blue. The sudden noise of the crowd seemed miles away as medical staff checked her torn ligaments. The immediate cost of that single landing was a severely sprained ankle and third-degree lateral ligament damage that changed her physical reality in a matter of seconds. Before she could process what had happened, she was swept up in a storm of celebrations. Bela Karolyi lifted her fragile frame into his arms, carrying her out onto the podium so she could stand with her teammates. That image of the coach carrying the injured gymnast was beamed into millions of living rooms around the planet. It was framed as the ultimate sign of courage, a perfect story of sacrifice and bravery on the world stage. The media machine quickly turned her suffering into an American myth. Front pages called her a hero, and television shows celebrated her willingness to break her own body for a medal. Yet very few people asked if a teenager should ever be put in a position where she had to ruin her health for a gold trophy. The triumph was real, but the heavy human cost was hidden behind red, white, and blue ribbons. The injury opened up a serious debate about the extreme culture of elite gymnastics. For decades, young athletes were trained to trust their coaches without question, even when their bodies were breaking down. Pain was pushed aside as just an obstacle, and personal safety was often placed secondary to winning. Kerri became the face of a system that asked young girls to give up everything for a fleeting moment of glory. Months later, the real score math became public knowledge, adding a layer of deep sadness to the tale. Her second vault had not even been required to secure the team gold medal. The points earned by her teammates before her jump had already put the gold out of reach for their rivals. The brutal vault that tore her ankle apart was completely unnecessary for the final team outcome. When Kerri learned the mathematical truth, the weight of that night settled over her in a whole new way. She had risked her future health for a score that did not even change the medal standing. The realization that her sacrifice was built on a mistake was a quiet punch to the heart. It proved how blind obedience in high-pressure moments can lead to permanent damage without any real need. That second vault in Atlanta effectively marked the end of her high-level competitive career. At just 19 years old, the sport she had given her entire childhood to was suddenly over. The physical damage to her joint meant she could no longer train at the extreme intensity needed for international gymnastics. The bright spotlight that had burned so hot for 1 week suddenly dimmed, leaving her to build a new life away from the wooden horse. The transition from world-famous athlete to ordinary citizen was long and quiet. There were no packed arenas or cheering crowds in the quiet rooms of physical therapy clinics. She spent long months relearning how to move without pain, enduring painful rehab work just to walk normally again. The glamour of the Olympic Games faded into the daily grind of recovering from an injury that would never fully heal. Her story helped shift how society viewed the treatment of young athletes in elite sports. People began to look closer at the intense pressure placed on teenagers by powerful adult coaches. What was once praised as simple grit was now being recognized as a dangerous environment that put trophies ahead of long-term health. The conversation around athlete safety began to slowly change across the country. The public reaction to her jump reflected a complicated cultural standard. Society celebrated a young girl pushing through terrible pain because it made for an inspiring story on television. It showed how easily audiences accept the suffering of an athlete as long as it comes with a golden outcome. The applause obscured the cold reality of a child hurting herself for the entertainment of millions. Long after the flashbulbs stopped popping, the physical debt remained unpaid. Weather changes brought sharp aches to her left ankle, and simple daily tasks served as constant reminders of that summer night in 1996. The gold medal sat in a safe place, but the body that won it carried permanent scars. True athletic sacrifice does not disappear when the parade ends. It stays in the joints forever. The narrative around the Magnificent Seven often focused on their collective victory, but Kerri paid a higher personal price than anyone else on that floor. Her teammates went on to perform in post-Olympic shows, while she was restricted to sitting on the sidelines in a heavy cast. The contrast highlighted the cold reality of sport, where one bad step can instantly change a life while the world keeps moving forward. In the years that followed, Kerri Strug worked hard to define herself beyond those 20 seconds of fame. She earned college degrees, worked in public service, and built a peaceful family life outside of the athletic spotlight. She refused to let a single split-second jump in a red warm-up suit be the only thing that defined her time on Earth. She chose to build a life where her personal worth was not tied to a score. The legacy of her vault helped pave the way for modern reforms in sports medicine and coaching standards. Today, medical staff have the final say on whether an injured athlete can continue to compete, taking that heavy burden off the shoulders of young competitors and intense coaches. Her painful moment on the mat forced the athletic world to build better safety nets for future generations. Looking back at the famous broadcast footage today, the story feels very different than it did in 1996. Viewers no longer just see a picture of pure patriotism. They see a young athlete trapped in a high-pressure system doing what she was taught to do. The triumph is still there, but it is now joined by a clear understanding of the heavy price she was asked to pay. She managed to reclaim her own voice from the legendary myth that others built around her. She speaks about her past with honest reflection, acknowledging both the pride of winning and the real reality of the damage she suffered. She is no longer just a character in an Olympic story. She is the sole owner of her own past, present, and future. The truth about that famous night in Atlanta remains anchored in simple human facts. It was not just a story of golden glory or dramatic victory. It was a clear demonstration of what happens when a young person gives everything they have to give. Kerri Strug proved her legendary strength to the entire world, but the lasting lesson of her vault is a quiet reminder that human beings are always worth far more than the medals they win.